The sky looked too perfect that morning, sharp blue, not a cloud in sight. As I stepped out of the car and onto the circular gravel drive of the country club venue, I thought maybe this time it'll be different. Maybe this is the day I'm family again. The white hydrangeas spilling over the entrance, the polished silver lanterns hanging from every beam. Everything screamed dream wedding. But inside, I felt like I'd wandered into a home that used to be mine and found all the locks changed. My heels clicked too loudly on the marble floor as I entered. A pair of greeters smiled past me, never meeting my eyes. I adjusted the shawl on my shoulders, reminded myself of something Dad used to say. You teach people how to treat you. So I lifted my chin, walked in like I belonged, like I hadn't been quietly pushed to the sidelines for years. My brother Ransom had always been the golden child. Mom and Noreen made sure of that. Today was his day. I just hoped I wouldn't vanish in the background like I always had. I moved toward the seating chart near the entrance, scanning rows of elegant calligraphy. Names floated across a mirror-backed board like some curated exhibit. Except mine. My name was off. Odessia Rayner, a misspelling sharp enough to feel intentional, was scribbled in the bottom corner, room 6B, table 29, tucked near the kitchen corridor. I blinked once, took a steady breath. This wasn't the first time I'd been someone's afterthought. As I walked past whispering guests, I caught eyes darting away. Was it my dress? Too simple? Too late to care? The corners of my mouth tightened, but I kept moving, dignity intact. I'd brought something with me, tucked carefully into my handbag, a small wooden photo frame from home, a picture of my father holding my hand when I was 6. Just the two of us. I didn't bring it to reminisce. I brought it to remember who used to see me. The table was shoved up against a wall next to a swinging door labeled staff only. There were 6 chairs, 3 of them empty. The others held distant acquaintances or people too absorbed in their phones to say hello. I sat down slowly, careful not to snag my dress. Within 5 minutes, a waiter asked if I was with the band. I shook my head, managed a polite smile. I'd played that part before. Background noise to someone else's spotlight. I could hear laughter from the main tables, champagne toasts, forks clinking. I didn't see Noreen until she passed by with her rhinestone clutch, glancing at me as if I were a misplaced coat. "Oh, you're here," she said. "Didn't think you'd make it." She didn't wait for a reply, just kept walking. Something in my chest twisted. This was supposed to be a celebration, but for me it felt like a cautionary tale. Like those birthdays when Mum would hand Ransom the first slice of cake and leave mine sitting until the frosting hardened. I thought of leaving right then, picking up my keys and disappearing, like they'd probably prefer. But I didn't. I stayed because I wasn't 12 anymore. I had a spine now, not just wishful thinking. A burst of memory hit Dad's funeral. I'd sat in the 3rd pew while Ransom delivered the eulogy. I wasn't asked to speak. Noreen said, "You'd only make it about yourself." Maybe this wedding wasn't about exclusion. Maybe it was a continuation. Same script, new stage. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. I smiled bitterly at the punchline only I could hear. But I wasn't crying. I was cataloguing. Every look, every omission. It's what smart people do when they're outnumbered. They take notes. That's when I saw him, not a relative, not one of the groomsmen. He was tall, suit sharp, but not flashy, and he had this calm about him, like nothing surprised him anymore. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on me. I looked away, then looked back. He was still there. He walked over slowly, slid into the empty chair next to me without asking. "Odessa," he said, like he'd known me all his life. I blinked. "Yeah," I answered. He leaned in slightly, voice low. "Come with me." He held out his hand, just his palm open, no urgency, no explanation. His fingers were warm, solid, and for a second I felt seen. Not pitied, not tolerated, seen. I stared at him. Was this a prank? A set-up? Another family trick with a new face? My thoughts raced, but something in his eyes said no. This wasn't about them. This was about me. I didn't move right away. I weighed it all. Then I reached for my bag, felt the photo frame inside. The corners dug into my palm as I stood up, a grounding pain. As I turned to follow him, I looked one last time toward the head table. Ransom was laughing. Noreen was whispering into Mum's ear. None of them noticed me leaving. I didn't know yet if he was rescuing me or leading me into another trap, but I followed anyway. He led me down a side hallway, away from the polished chaos of the main room. The hallway curved gently into a lounge area near the ballroom. Low lighting, muted jazz, the occasional pop of champagne corks. The scent of wood polish mixed with something floral, maybe gardenia, hung in the air. It was quiet but not private. Eyes followed us. A few heads tilted. I could feel the air around me thicken. I kept my pace steady, one hand gripping the strap of my purse, the other still buzzing from where he'd held it. "Trust but verify," I muttered under my breath. Something I'd heard Reagan say in a documentary once. It seemed fitting now. I didn't know him, I didn't know his game, but something told me he wasn't here to humiliate me. At least not yet. He finally slowed near the end of the lounge and glanced at me. I caught his name in a whisper, then stored it, noted his calm eyes, still didn't smile. I needed to stay sharp. You don't survive years in the shadows by believing in white knights. Before I could take a full breath, Noreen appeared. Like she'd been waiting, she had that smile. Tight, curated, the kind you wear for donors or people you secretly hate but can't afford to show it. Her hand looped into mine as if we were best friends. I stiffened. "Oh, there you are," she chirped, turning to the cluster of well-dressed guests behind her. "Everyone, this is my sister-in-law, Odessa. She's our career woman, still working, still single, but always on the move." The words hit like a slap covered in frosting. Still single, still working, like I was a project that had stalled out. The people smiled politely. One woman raised an eyebrow and gave a half laugh, like she wasn't sure if it was meant to be a joke. Another man, probably someone's cousin, said, "Well, you know, it's never too late. My sister met her second husband at 45. I nodded, lips tight. Polite pity is worse than outright cruelty. At least with cruelty, you know where you stand. I felt like a museum piece. Look, everyone, here's the cautionary tale. The woman who chased a career and ended up alone. The stranger stood nearby, quiet, observing. His silence was beginning to make sense. Maybe he saw what this was and knew better than to interfere with a performance that had already been rehearsed too many times. The advice started to come fast. "You should try that dating app, you know, the one with the commercials. Do you go to church? You could meet someone there. Men get intimidated if you seem too smart. Maybe soften your energy a bit." I wanted to scream. Instead, I sipped water and gave vague smiles. Nodded. Let them believe I was taking it in. They meant well. Most of them, that's the trap. "Bless your heart," one woman said as she patted my arm, and I nearly choked on my drink. In the South, that phrase can mean anything from genuine concern to a backhanded insult. Here it meant poor thing. But I didn't show it. I'd learned a long time ago how to be gracious under fire. Smile, tilt your head, collect every word like a receipt you'll never use. I looked up and caught the stranger's eyes again. He was holding out a fresh glass of water, the smallest gesture, but it felt like an anchor, a tether in the middle of a social storm. And then it hit me. This wasn't about being single. This wasn't even about the wedding. It was the same message I'd received since I was a kid. Stay quiet, stay small, don't ruin the picture. I had been cast in the role of the family's background character, the shadow, the placeholder. When people ignore you long enough, I thought, you start to believe you're not worth seeing. But something cracked. I wasn't going to apologize for being me, not anymore. I thought of a quote I'd written once on a sticky note and left on my fridge. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Eleanor Roosevelt. The stranger leaned in just enough to be heard. We can leave when you're ready. I turned back to the woman who was midway through recommending a matchmaking podcast and said, "Actually, I think I'm good." Then I turned my back and walked away. Clean, calm, no apology. The murmur behind me was instant. Gasps, maybe, a few chuckles. Noreen's voice faded behind me. I didn't care. My pulse pounded in my ears, the adrenaline of rebellion. Unfamiliar, but electric. I wasn't used to making waves, but maybe it was time. As we walked, the stranger whispered, "That was impressive." I shrugged. Took me long enough. The photo frame in my bag shifted again, hard against my ribs. I pressed my arm against it. It didn't hurt exactly. It reminded me I was still carrying things I hadn't put down yet. We re-entered the ballroom just as the DJ's voice rose above the crowd. "All right, ladies, it's time for all the single women to make their way to the floor for the bouquet toss." I froze, like a spotlight had been switched on. Noreen stood near the DJ booth, grinning. Her eyes met mine. She knew exactly what she was doing. The stranger leaned in close. His voice was low, but I couldn't make out the words. And just like that, everything shifted again. This time I wasn't sure if I'd dodge the trap or walk straight into it, but either way I knew I wouldn't be quiet. The DJ's voice cut through the hum of conversation, smooth, expectant. "Ladies, single and ready, gather at the dance floor." The words struck me with a shock of clarity. I hadn't come here to be paraded like a piece of display. My heart thumped, every eye shifted. I felt the sharp tilt of the spotlight. I froze, unsure whether to step forward or shrink back into the crowd. The stranger stood nearby, silent, letting me choose. Each step toward the floor felt weighty, like moving through thick air. "Damned if you do, damned if you don't," I whispered under my breath. I readied my posture. I moved. Noreen's voice pierced through. "Come on, Odessa, don't be shy." She swept her arm outward, directing the gathers toward me. Guests laughed and clapped as I was ushered into the semicircle of single women. Some murmured, "She really needs this," as if the moment were charity. My limbs stiffened. I plastered on a polite smile, focusing on the flicker of crystal prisms above. Perfume hung in the air, sweat warmed the nape of my neck. Chandeliers blinked in my peripheral vision. The stranger lingered, phone in hand. Was he filming? Observing? Evidence in waiting? I forced the chatter in my brain down. Don't lose control now. The toss dripped with intention. Noreen's toss arced with precision, nearly aimed straight at me. Chairs parted naturally as if on cue. Guests clapped. Some cheered mockingly. I caught the bouquet awkwardly. It felt like I was holding a scarlet letter. I recalled birthday parties where I was always last to receive gifts while Ransom got the spotlight. In that moment, I repeated a phrase in my head. "You teach people how to treat you by what you allow." The stranger's eyes locked on mine, silent encouragement. Not this time. Then memories flooded back. I was 16, standing on that stage for scholarship awards. Noreen had dressed in silks, her smile dazzling everyone toward her. I accepted my certificate with quiet dignity, feeling invisible. That moment shaped me. Betrayal laced through time. I realized I'd allowed silence to define me. Silence was permission. I tightened grip on the bouquet, its weight heavy in my palms. After the toss, aunties and cousins circled me, voices rising with gossip. I heard she once dated a man in New York. She's always been ambitious. Why hasn't she settled yet? They treated my life like a social menu. The laughter shimmered like broken glass. Noreen's lips curved subtly in triumph. The stranger shifted nearer, voice low. "They're feeding off you. Don't give them more." I listened. I felt exhaustion pooled in my chest. I was tired of being their joke. I steadied myself. I placed the bouquet deliberately onto a side table, refusing to keep holding their bait. I turned my back to them and walked toward the balcony. The crowd's gaze tracked me, but I walked anyway. The stranger followed behind, quiet, respectful. I inhaled the cool night air, tasted possibility. I breathed. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Eleanor Roosevelt's words, worn but potent. I felt something shift inside. My phone vibrated against my thigh. I didn't check it yet. The bouquet lay behind me, my symbol of resistance. The stranger joined me on the balcony, eyes scanning the glow inside. I felt a tremor of power. The hush was deep, and then I heard the text tone again. They're about to announce something. Don't leave. My head swiveled to the ballroom. The silence behind me was loud. I didn't know if the message was a warning or an invitation, but I knew the next move would be mine. The ballroom had cooled, not just in temperature, but in tone. The after-dinner haze hung over the room like dust in sunlight. Music played soft jazz now, something forgettable. I sat at the edge of our table, back straight, eyes forward, pretending to be at ease while my body hummed like a wire stretched too tight. The stranger sat 2 seats away, close enough to notice, far enough to respect, the space I hadn't asked for. I scanned the room. A few guests laughed too loud. Chairs scraped the floor, silverware tapped lightly, but what I felt most weren't sounds. It was the glances. Quick, curious, some pitiful. I sipped water just to give my hands something to do. My father's voice came to me. You never stake your ground by apologizing for your presence. He'd said that after I was cut from a family photo. By accident, they'd claimed. I didn't believe them then either. My mother's voice floated across the table before I saw her face. She leaned toward one of the neighbors, voice just loud enough to be overheard, intentionally so. Odessa's sweet, she said, smiling faintly, but she only writes checks. They're not going to take her seriously. The neighbor chuckled, nodded. I didn't turn my head. I didn't let the heat rise to my cheeks. But my hand trembled on the linen napkin. In my head, I answered her, I've built more alone than any of you did together. I breathed through it. I'd been dismissed so often I'd learned to count the pattern in their footsteps. The stranger shifted closer, not speaking, just being there, and somehow that was enough. I stood to excuse myself, deciding I needed fresh air or a moment or both. On my way past the hallway near the catering area, I caught 2 staffers chatting too casually. Wasn't her name on the original trust? One asked. Yeah, the other replied. That clause got swapped out last minute. Old guy said to leave it clean before the merge. My body moved before my mind caught up. I followed the hallway farther, turned left, past the kitchen doors and slipped into a side office I remembered from years ago, a place I'd once played hide and seek. It hadn't changed. The filing cabinet was still jammed in the corner. On the desk, a leather folder sat half open with trust papers inside. I knew the seal. I knew the pages. But the name that wasn't there, mine. No mention, not even in the distribution clause. The line that used to read, to be divided among surviving children, had been narrowed. To be divided among Ransom and Noreen. My name had been written out of our family's history with the clean efficiency of a typo correction. When I came back to the ballroom, I didn't shout, I didn't shake. I walked like someone who knew where her shoes were planted. Ransom saw me first. His eyes narrowed. I stood between him and Velda, holding the folder like a tray of evidence. This document, I said, was changed. I'd like to know why. Conversations dipped. People leaned. Ransom forced a half laugh. It's legal. You wouldn't understand. I did understand, I said quietly, but you were counting on silence to keep me quiet. He blinked. Velda's smile turned to something tighter. I didn't wait for their permission to speak. I already had. I stepped back, handed the folder to the nearest table, and left them with it. Out on the balcony, the air bit a little harder. I leaned against the railing, trying to breathe through the questions clawing at my ribs. Was I burning the last bridge with them, or had it already collapsed behind me long ago? The stranger joined me again, same quiet presence, same simple words. You did the right thing. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to believe it, but I didn't deny it either. As we re-entered the ballroom, I heard it, voices stirring. Someone whispered, "Did she just hand him a document?" Then a clatter. Ransom stood, his glass tipping, spilling bourbon across the linen, the glass shattering against the floor. And just when I thought I'd heard the worst of it, Ransom's tipped glass shattered, turning heads in my direction. My reflection in the mirror was sharper than I expected. The restroom light was harsh, white, unkind. I stood there, heart thumping, staring at eyes that shone with tension, not shame. In the silence, I heard my grandmother's voice. Speaking the truth never makes you the villain, but it will make you the target. I wiped the smudged makeup from under my eyes and inhaled deeply. No tears fell, only resolve. 2 women entered, voices hushed, giggles punctuated by glances. They said she gave that speech. Bold move. I tensed, letting the door click behind them. They would talk. Let them talk. Enough had been spoken over me for years. I unlocked the door, squared my shoulders, and left. The ballroom felt different. The music was softer now, voices lower, servers circulating with trays of dessert. I stepped in quietly, past tables where clusters of relatives whispered behind hands. Noreen's smile flickered as I crossed paths. Ransom's eyes held curiosity or reprimand. I couldn't tell. The stranger caught my gaze. I nodded. That small gesture felt like a pact. I may have broken things tonight, but I meant to rebuild. Velda took the microphone. She spoke about love, about legacy, and then wove in a backhanded line, "You always see those who step forward. Some would do it even when it's already too late." She smirked just enough. A sting. I stood, called for the mic. A ripple passed through the crowd. Faces turned. Expectation rose. I cleared my throat, voice steady, calm. Families should celebrate love, not rewrite history or cancel it when it's inconvenient. Silence followed. Some faces flinched, some stiffened. Her own smile faltered. The moment hung long like a held breath. Then came the moment. I continued. I know of a contract, not signed in ink, but in silence, where names were removed, shares erased, and voices hushed. Velda's composure cracked. You could see the shift in her posture. Guests murmured. I let the silence stretch. I didn't reach again for the microphone. I stepped back. The statement had landed. It unsettled her. It unsettled them. Ransom stood abruptly and stormed to the bar, slamming his hand on the counter. Velda snatched her purse and disappeared down a hallway. Noreen averted her eyes, playing with her wine glass as if it were a prop. Aunts and cousins whispered, heads inclined toward me, curiosity replacing mockery. I realized then the chain of fear was loosening. I felt awake, split, yes, but awake. I found a quiet seat at the edge of the room. The stranger sat beside me, wordless. I said softly, "I'm not trying to break the family. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken." He replied, "Some things need breaking before they can be built right." His voice was gentle. The wooden frame in my bag pressed heavier than before. Its weight was a reminder, not a burden. My phone buzzed. I checked it. A message, no name. "You think this is over?" Chill crawled up my spine. I stared at the screen. The room seemed to contract. The night stretched long. I didn't know who sent it, but I knew someone was just getting started. I replayed the last chapters of my life in my head as we sat through dessert service. The laughter, the polite smiles, the stabs disguised as compliments. I wondered if my warning had landed. Across the room, guests murmured about my toast. Some nodded at me, others rolled their eyes. But Velda, she laughed more than usual, raising her glass with a practiced tilt, gliding between tables, exchanging whispered looks. Behind that calm mask, I sensed something dangerous brewing. Some people don't fight you loud, they fight you pretty. The slideshow began again, this time with a new introduction. The first slides were innocent, bride and groom moments, smiling family faces. Then came an image I didn't expect. Me, arms full of trash bags. At a backyard cookout I hosted for relatives who never said thank you. The room gasped, more photos followed, cropped sequences where I'd been in a family photo removed or where I'd stood too far back, digitally erased. The last image, me alone at a reunion, distant and blurred. The caption, "We're grateful for everyone who made this day special, those who've always known their place." The statement stung like betrayal. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few titters from younger family members hovered. I sat frozen, chest tight. This was not an accident. A woman from the groom's side leaned over and spat quietly. That wasn't right. The edges of my vision blurred. The stranger's jaw tightened. Noreen's eyes darted away. Ransom's smirk was thin, as if he'd placed the bet and was waiting for payoff. The air felt dangerous. I stood abruptly and walked toward the garden doors, clutching my clutch bag like armor. My steps felt reckless, fueled by anger rather than fear. In the damp, cool air, I could hear pulses of music, faintly echoing from inside. My breath caught. I recalled how, as a girl, every time I made a move, Velda dismissed it in whispers. "She'll fade. She doesn't understand her place." This wasn't new. They just grew bolder with an audience. I whispered into the night, "Enough." I stormed back inside, but not to demand space. I walked past the tech assistant toward the console. Softly I said, "I need a copy of that slideshow, for memory's sake." He froze, then nodded. I added, "If anybody asks, say the bride requested it." Then I slipped it into my purse without fanfare. I didn't confront Velda yet. I circumvented expectation. I moved toward Aunt June, who sat quietly, a little old woman who never spoke loud in family meetings. I knelt beside her, voice low. "Please remember what you saw tonight." Her eyes filled, she nodded. "I'll remember everything, and I'll speak when you ask me to." That moment shifted something in me. Later that night, back in my temporary suite, I unzipped my clutch bag. I pulled out the wooden frame I'd tucked in earlier. Inside was the faded letter from grandfather, praising me for holding the family when no one showed. I placed it next to the printout of the slideshow images I'd asked for. On one side, the truth I lived. On the other, how they tried to define me. I whispered in darkness. They chose the wrong version of me to fight. My resolve didn't feel like courage yet, more like necessity. My phone buzzed. I picked it up. It was a voice memo. I pressed play. Velda's voice, cool and clipped. "You never learned when to stay quiet." That cut deeper than anything else tonight. I hit delete, just once. Then I dropped the phone face down. I already knew what needed to be done. The night was deepening. The chandeliers dimmed, casting shadows around the edges of the ballroom. I sat alone near the fringe of the dance floor, replaying the evening's betrayals in my mind, tasting them like bitter wine. The weight of watching voices shift, doors closed slightly behind me, and laughter echoed just shy of my ears. It all pressed me tight. Then he reappeared, without fanfare. He slid a small envelope across the back of my chair. "I think you'll want this," he whispered. I opened it with fingers that trembled slightly. Inside was a USB drive, some printed pages, raw images, high-res slides, unedited clips, timestamps, versions they didn't want anyone to see. I caught his eye. This was more than kindness. It was alliance. It meant he never saw me as just collateral. Moments later, the big screens flickered. A live social feed launched. Someone in the crowd had triggered it. A post appeared. Bride's sister stepping in. Who is she? My name tag flashed beneath my image, the caption repeated. Phones lifted, screens glowed, guests murmured. Suddenly, perception was rewinding the narrative without truth. I felt a chill. They weaponized perception faster than truth. My chest tightened. I steadied myself. I walked forward through the gathering to the stage podium. The groom's closing remarks were about to begin. I leaned into a technician's ear, whispered, "Play my version first." The house lights shifted. My edited footage played first. Unedited, raw, telling their silent lies back. Faces stiffened, the altered stories collapsed in real time. I didn't shout, I just let the evidence speak. Velda jumped to her feet, her voice sharp. "This is inappropriate," Ransom added. "You're defaming family." I remained calm. "These are the files you used to redefine me behind closed doors." I triggered side-by-side comparison. What they showed, what they hid. Gasps, phones aimed at me. Her composure cracked. Ransom stuttered, the crowd shifted, then Aunt June rose, slowly, deliberately. "I see both versions," she said, voice steady. "She's the one who built family memories you erase." Heads nodded. Velda's face paled. At the back, the stranger gave a subtle nod. A spark passed between us, a recognition that this night had turned. I left the stage and paused beside Noreen. "I won't stay hidden so you can keep redefining me," I said softly. Then I stepped outdoors. The night air hit me as I walked onto the terrace. Guests followed at a distance, drawn by the storm unleashed inside. He joined me, presenting the wooden frame I carried long ago. The frame held our shared past, the promise of being seen. I raised it and spoke. "I reclaim this. I stand in my truth now." Behind me, a phone pinged. The screen lit up with a new live stream caption. "Bride stolen?" Heads turned, cameras shifted, whispers filled the air. I stood firm. In that ripple of screens and whispers, I knew the war had only just begun. The ballroom felt like a stage after the curtain has dropped. Plates pushed aside, guests drifting toward their coats and goodbyes. Soft music threaded through the room, low and thin. I stood near the microphone, watching clusters of faces I'd known all my life lean into one another's whispers. This was my window. My pulse wasn't fast, just steady, like the slow beat before a starter pistol. This is the moment to let truth speak louder than sorrow, I thought, my fingers brushing the USB drive hidden inside my palm. The wooden frame in my bag pressed against my ribs. I cued the tech. The house lights dimmed, murmurs cut off like a switch. My voice filled the room from the speakers, calm and unshaken. "What you're about to see is the story they didn't want you to see." On the screens, the raw footage began. No glossy edits, no cropped smiles, just what was real. The earlier slideshow reappeared, then split to show behind-the-scenes clips, timestamps, voice memos. Guests saw the original photos beside the doctored ones. Velda's face drained of colour. Noreen's jaw tightened. Ransom looked cornered but forced a laugh. "And here," my voice narrated, "is where my name vanished." The wooden frame showed up in an old home photo on screen, a thread of continuity no one could rewrite. Gasps rippled across the crowd. A young woman dabbed her eyes. An older man muttered, "This is wrong." When the footage ended, I stepped forward, contract documents in my hand. My fingers didn't tremble. This is not rumor. This is a forced erasure. Scans of the contracts glowed next to the video, clauses highlighted, signatures removed, timestamps mismatched. The proof rolled like a tide. A guest whispered they crossed a line. Across the room, the stranger straightened, silent but with eyes like anchors. The first soft applause started, hesitant, but real. Velda tried to seize the air. "This is defamation," she spat. Ransom barked, "You're tearing this family apart," but someone near the back shouted, "Let her speak." I kept my voice level. You rewrote my past. Now I reclaim it in front of you. I didn't blink. The backlash was immediate. Velda's friends storming off, others frozen like they'd seen a ghost. Noreen stared at her shoes, pretending a stain on the carpet deserved her attention. Aunt June moved closer, planting herself between Velda and me. She's always been the one holding this family together, she said, her tone a quiet gavel. A few cousins nodded. Isaiah, a guest I'd once helped when no one else would, stepped forward. I owe her more than I can say, he told the crowd. The tide shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't an island. I stepped back to the center stage. The air felt lighter but sharper. I looked at the stranger, then at the faces, some warm, some turned away. I wasn't allowed to be part of the picture, I said softly, but tonight, I'm the one framing the truth. Some stood, some clapped, some lowered their gaze. Cell phone cameras found me, not as a punchline, but as the center of the story. Then a loud ping broke the room. Ransom's phone screen lit up and an explosive message thread scrolled across. Redacted pages of my late-night legal filings, a leaked deposition spilling onto the glass for anyone close enough to see. Guests craned their necks. The hush was electric. And as those redacted pages danced across his screen, I realized I didn't just expose them, I made them expose themselves. I woke up to quiet. No clicks of heels, no microphones buzzing, no glass tapping for attention. Just the hum of early sunlight leaking through thin curtains and the faint creak of old wood beneath my bed. I sat up slowly. The dress from the night before lay folded over a chair, its edges stiff with memory. I looked over to the side table. There it was, the wooden frame, still intact, still full of every label they'd tried to assign me, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like something I could choose to leave behind. I slipped on a soft grey sweater, slacks, flat shoes, nothing to prove, just comfort. No more masks, no more edges softened for someone else's comfort. The ballroom was nearly empty now. Most of the decorations had been packed, the music long gone. A few faces remained, Aunt June, two cousins who'd whispered sorry into my shoulder the night before, the stranger standing quietly near the back window. And Noreen, still not saying much, but here. People approached me, not to pity but to acknowledge. Quiet nods, a squeeze of the arm, a simple, you did what had to be done. One older guest stopped and said gently, you were always part of this day. That was all. But it landed deep. I didn't need Velda to admit anything. Her silence, red-eyed and still, was loud enough. I met her gaze briefly. No triumph, no invitation, just the closing of one chapter. I reached into my bag and pulled out the frame. For years it had been mine to protect. Proof of place, proof of love. I walked slowly to the center of the room. A small pedestal still stood where the wedding guest book had been. I placed the frame on it, upright. I didn't say much, just, this belonged to a girl waiting for permission. Now it belongs to someone who gives it herself. A few people clapped. Some cried. I didn't look back. Someone near me gasped. They held up a phone. You've gone viral again, they said, a strange sort of awe in their voice. The post was simple, a photo of me during the slideshow moment, captioned, "Who was the real bride?" Comments streamed below. She deserved better. She's the backbone they ignored. She didn't steal the spotlight. They tried to dim hers. I read none of it out loud, but it echoed anyway. The stranger stood beside me now, still quiet, not in the way of someone hiding, but someone witnessing, letting me be seen. I don't need everyone's approval, I said to the few gathered around, but I want to live openly as the woman I am. Noreen looked away. Aunt June smiled like she'd known all along. One cousin cried quietly into his sleeve. You can't define me by what you remove, I added. That was for them, yes, but mostly it was for me. Later, out by the balcony, the sun fully crested now. I stood with him, no words at first, just breath, just air I didn't have to ration. He handed me a document, clean, simple, a new partnership, something creative, something I could shape on my own terms. "This is mine now," I said, tapping my finger against the cover. Not a question. He didn't smile, he just nodded. As I stepped back toward the light, my phone buzzed one more time. A comment had just been added under the viral thread. It read, "She paints her own future." I looked up, and as the sunlight touched my face, I knew I was no longer a shadow. I was becoming sky.